You are listening to Echoes from the Blackfriary, a production created by students of The Ohio State University and partnered with the Irish Archaeology Field School in Trim, Ireland. In our previous episodes, we discussed how consecrated areas seeped into local folklore and how these stories evolved over time within the local landscape. In this episode, we will unravel the connection between folklore and archaeology at the Blackfriary. In doing so, we will explore how folklore and archaeology are inherently linked. In an interview, forensic archaeologist Esther Poulos explained this to us in reference to the Forgotten War of 1799.
What were some of the difficulties you face in trying to work around something that was, you said, already had sort of folklore surrounding it, and so you're trying to work through that to find the actual history in the battlefield archaeology?
There was a lot of local knowledge because this war had been so local and had lived in local legends but not really anywhere else. So we could actually make a lot of use of that. Obviously the way that mainly survived in folklore was, like I said, the names of the places. And they actually related to historical places where the battles had been.
Esther Poulos introduced the connection between folklore and archaeology that she observed in her work as a forensic archaeologist. Folklorist Marissa Weinecke further explores the connection between these two concepts in her discussion of the Blackfriary site.
Folklore has the capacity to remember things in a way that history tends to not, because folklore can capture things such as the idea that a field is a good place to bury someone when you can't have a grave marker because the ground isn't consecrated, or you have unofficial grave markers. So folklore is a really good way of remembering unofficial details that have kind of gotten muddied through time. You can look at what people are saying about the spaces that they encounter. You can look at how people are interacting with their landscape through stories, and the stories can reveal not only their interactions with it, but perhaps their perceptions of the past. So like with the clean burials, this is a better example. There's a field that is remembered as having had some sort of religious importance for burials because it was a monastery, but that monastic history isn't necessarily going to be remembered by the individuals using it to bury unbaptized children. It is the religiosity of the site is kind of carried through time, but at the end you kind of have this folkloric recognition that this field is a good place for unbaptized babies because of this past history. So if you look at what people are actually doing, sometimes you can, through folklore, get a sense of the things that are lost in official history.
Finally, we interviewed site director and archaeologist Finola O'Carroll about her perspective of how folklore affects the excavation of the Blackfriary and the role of consecrated ground.
That's somewhat tricky because I haven't encountered direct folkloric tales. In fact, I would almost say the opposite. So there's the awareness of a cemetery. There are some stories of a haunted house. In some respects, they didn't connect directly to the friary, and I think that is in part due to the fact that there were no remains visible above ground. So this place's identification as a friary was sinking and being overtaken by simply its reference as the field. The other side of this then, though, comes in with the clean burials. And that's the thing that I find really interesting, because with those burials, which we assume were carried out here because of the known associations, in some respect, with this as a burial ground, we have a veil of silence. And that's the thing that I find really striking, that no one that I have spoken to can say to me, yes, I knew there were infants buried there. That's the thing I find really amazing. There are stories that can offer amazing insights. One of the most truly remarkable related to a site that we excavated in County Meath a number of years ago in a place called Raystown. We excavated a site that contained a number of horizontal mills. Was also a place where there was a burial ground, and clearly people had lived there from about the 6th to the 10th century AD. And a child who lived in a house near that site told a story where she said, in the field opposite my house there were mills, and there were monks and nuns living there, about this, that and the other. But there were chills running down our spines when we read this. And it's like, how did she know there were mills there? They went out of use 1,000 years ago. So that's the power of folklore. I think that the idea of actively looking for stories that connect the memory of the town to this site and to other places around it is something that is extremely important, because it will seep into the consciousness of the locals and it will make them value the stories that they have more highly and hopefully bring them forward, because we're trying to keep this project that we have also ongoing in parallel with yours to gather these stories, and so that people will value them instead of kind of leaving them die, because we don't know what stories have been lost. And the idea of trying to conserve the ones that are still out there is extremely important. So something like this that helps so much in raising people's perceptions and awareness of what they already have themselves.
Archaeologist Finola O'Carroll's interview discussed the folklore in the context of the consecrated grounds, specifically of the Blackfriary archaeology site. Through her interview, along with the interviews of forensic archaeologist Esther Poulos and folklorist Marissa Weinecke, we have examined the connection that exists between folklore and archaeology and how the two are inherently bound. In Episode 1, we discussed the concept of consecrated ground and its relation to local folklore. In Episode 2, we explored the folklore behind the local story known as Man in the Sack. In this most recent episode, we contextualized both consecrated ground and folklore into the Killeen burials at the Blackfriary. Similar themes run through all 3 episodes, with the focus placed on the relationship between folklore and archaeology. We hope that you have enjoyed the series. Thank you for listening.